Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming here this afternoon. As you know, under the Financial Management Act, we now actually have to publish a pre-election economic and fiscal update on the official government webpage or Ministry of Economy webpage within 14 days of the commencement of the campaign period for a general election, which officially began on 26 April 2022. This is, of course, the first time there has been ever such a requirement since independence that the government, that is the incumbent government, has to publish the economic and fiscal updates of the broad public financial management, management of the economy. What is the debt situation, the projected growth rates, the various sectors that's contributing to the economy, our repayments, our operational expenditure, etc. You find a whole lot of information in there. This, of course, ensures that also it gives members of the public the outlook for the medium term, the details on the government debt, contingent liabilities also, major fiscal risks, and details of other socioeconomic indicators. The pre-election economic and fiscal update will be available, as I said, on www.economy.gov.fj and the Fijian government website, www.fiji.gov.fj. I think we can, we've got a click. So where's the clicker? So there you go. So that's the pre-election economic and fiscal update. So that's it. You can go down and look at that. That's the statement from us, the statement of responsibility. And then you have the PS economy statement. And then, as you said, you've got the various chapters there. Chapter 1 is economic performance and outlook, international economic performance and outlook, which has a small summary of that. Domestic economic performance and outlook, the recent trend in tourism, consumption, investment activity, labor market conditions, inflation, international prices, money and credit, exchange rate, external sector, foreign reserves, and of course fiscal performance and outlook. Fiscal management during the pandemic, the half-year fiscal performance, revenue performance, expenditure performance, fiscal outlook, government debt, and fiscal risks. All of that is set there. We urge all members of the public to please access this information. It's available for free. I urge also you journalists yourselves, half of you are not actually getting the facts right, to also look at the information that's available. And there's obviously hard copies, but we understand that the Elections Office will also making or facilitating this to ensure that perhaps the political parties that are registered political parties do receive hard copies, but of course anybody can access that. It is critically important, ladies and gentlemen, that when we go into elections, as we see in most mature jurisdictions, that whenever elections are held and whenever political parties, for example, make or give assurances to members of the public or state their policies, they actually base it on facts and figures that are publicly available. You will see recently that you have the Australian elections currently being conducted. And if you look at all the political parties, in particular the two major political parties, even the Greens, everybody is stating their policies and actually pricing them. And they base it on facts, on figures, I should say, that's publicly available, and then the policies are developed accordingly. As a requirement under the Financial Management Act also, it does now state that if a political party, a candidate for election to Parliament, or any other person representing or acting under the direction of a political party candidate makes a financial commitment, whether orally or in writing, the political party candidate or other person must immediately provide a written explanation setting out the following information. 1, how revenue for the financial commitment is to be raised. 2, how expenditure for the financial commitment is to be made. 3, how expenditure is to be allocated to different sectors and budget sector agencies. And 4, if expenditure exceeds revenue, how the deficit is to be financed. So if somebody comes along and says we are now going to make all the university studies all for free, they have to be able to price it. They have to be able to say where will they get the money from. They have to be able to say if they're going to keep the same level of deficit, then where will they cut from to be able to fund the entire tertiary institution studies being free. This is our standard practice in all mature jurisdictions when they go into elections. Unfortunately, we don't find any of the political parties in Fiji actually doing that. So this will set a new standard. Government has now provided the figures. They can, of course, work on that. The figures, of course, have been obtained from various independent institutions. And so this is our commitment as provided for under the Act. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, this is the first time such a transparent, accountable position has been taken by government. Of course, all of it is government's initiation, and we're now complying with the particular provision of the Act, and it's now available. Please use it. Please disseminate the information. Please tell people to go to the website or government Facebook page, and you'll be able to get that information. So this is the launch of the Pre-Election Economic and Fiscal Update. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Now we will invite the media for any questions.
So, given that this is a pre-election disclosure, how will this impact preparations towards election time for the government?
I don't understand the question.
Well, this is now public document. Come election time, when campaigning begins, how do you expect this to sort of factor into campaigning, not just for the government but for all political parties?
As we said, there's a requirement now in the law that if any political party, including Fiji First, if it goes out and makes commitments, if somebody's going to say we're going to build a 4-lane bridge over here, they need to be able to say, well, how much is it going to cost? They need to be able to say, where will they get the funding from? You can't just so willy-nilly make announcements on particular policy issues without actually costing it, because unfortunately that's what's happened in the past. People have gone to members of the public and assured them and made all sorts of commitments and said, yes, don't worry, we'll do X, Y, Z. But they're not serious about doing so. And I think the fact that you have all these political parties, in particular those ones who have been in Parliament for the past number of years, none of them have actually made an alternative budget. As you said, in other jurisdictions, it's practice for them to actually give an alternative budget. People have stood up and said lots of things. We've had, of course, people just say this morning in Parliament saying, $500 million has been wasted. Well, where did they get the figure from? And then when you question them as to where did you get the figure from, you say, oh, let's have an independent inquiry. But you made the statement saying $500 million has been wasted. How? Where? When did it happen? Which ministry did it happen from? So you see, you need better accountability. And I think any political party that actually wants to be honest and wants to take a principled stand and wants to be able to, and wants to be honest with the members of the public and not dupe them into making all sorts of false promises, they would actually welcome the figures that we've actually put out. They've got something to work from. They would also welcome the fact that they can now have to be, and they have to be actually, transparent under the law itself.
So based on the report provided, can you make some comments regards to the economic performance of Chinese financially and the forecasting?
We've already made our statement about the economic performance. We've had a revised budget. So if you look at most of the figures, statistics over here, the revised budget was just only about a month or so ago. They reflect that changes. Of course, there is a reflection in respect of, for example, there are different projections, as you said, about growth. ANZ is saying in excess of 20%. Westpac has now come out, I think 14% or 12%. The Macroeconomic Committee that is made up of PS for Economy and various other independent officers, including the Reserve Bank of Fiji, are predicting a growth rate of 11% this year. So if you look at the figures that have been plugged in, it's not the ANZ figures, it's what the government has projected, which is a lot more conservative figure, which is of 11%. So if you look at the figures, I mean, everything is there. It tells you, for example, about contingent liabilities. So, which entities have we, for example, given, guarantees for? Some of the ones we guaranteed previously, but they no longer require guarantee because they paid off their loans. Or they've gone off on their own. For example, like EFL, they no longer take government guarantees because they're now partially, they have other, shareholders. So that was one of the requirements, that they go off on their own. They don't require any more government guarantees. Others, for example, FBC have paid off their debts, so no longer require government guarantee. Same thing with Fiji Pine Limited, no longer government guarantee because they paid off their debt. So it gives you the whole gambit here. Of course, the government guarantee for Fiji Airways has increased substantially to what it was. There was no government guarantee for Fiji Airways until July, 2019. So it has all the figures here. It also talks about the government, the bond yields, It tells you about the operating receipts, how much money we collect. So everything that you require to be able to make assessments on the economy, your revenue streams, your expenditure streams, that will have an impact. I mean, this morning, somebody said in Parliament, they said, oh, we should cut back expenditure. And we said, where? And they said, oh, government ministers should cut back their salary. We're already a 20% reduction. But even if you took off, say, for example, $100,000, this is going to make a dent. What is really critically important is seeing how we are doing business now as government. And so, for example, we have, our wage bill for civil servants is about $1.1 billion out of a $3 billion expenditure. So people need to understand that. We need to be able to understand, for example, that there's a lot more automation. So we, for example, brought about FPOS machines in the hospitals and various other government agencies that improves efficiency, that requires less people to handle cash. You don't require more people to be able to carry out those processes. Individuals can do that. So, everything is actually here for you to be able to make a call on your economic policy and infrastructure, policies that you will, advocate for.
So, somewhat related to this pre-election disclosure, but an independent report from the World Bank about Fiji's economy, their revisions about growth and all that has come out. But Professor Bimal Prasad is now saying that the World Bank is wrong and that its projections are incorrect. What do you say to this sort of response?
Well, I think you're talking specifically about the poverty rates. The World Bank has actually revised the poverty rates. And they're saying now it's just slightly in excess of 24%. And they've actually come out and said the reason as to why the initial figures that were put out was incorrect. Look, I mean, unfortunately for Honorable Prasad, he's kind of caught in a conundrum because, as usual, he sort of shut his mouth before thinking, where, when it suits them, World Bank is correct. When it doesn't suit them, World Bank is not correct. The same thing with any media organization. A media organization is only independent if it is critical of government. In the same way with the economist, if it is critical of government, then only then that's an independent economist. But independence, of course, means that people who are objectively analyzing. If you, for example, you go overseas, you'll find economists, they will comment, for example, the government delivers a budget. They will say, look, out of the 10 policies announced by government, they will say, look, we think that 1 to 6 is really good. We think, for example, 7 to 9 is terrible, should not have been done, and 10 is kind of sitting on the fence. You don't get that in Fiji, unfortunately. The ones who do speak, for example, you have Nilesh Gaundars and the Wadanarsis of this world. And I'm glad you raised that because we issued a statement on the fact that what Nilesh Gaundar had said. I don't know whether Fiji Times published it at all. I know Fiji Village, the only thing that Fiji Village focused on was in the last paragraph. In the last paragraph, I've got a statement here, that we had said that we call on independent academics and commentators to provide objective and honest analysis of the Fijian economy. Don't be like or be misled by political biased academics like Wadanarsi and Nilesh Gaundar and their political masters, whose continuous and blatantly biased analysis continues to discredit their reputation. The story was not about what I said 99.9% in that press release. It was only about that last paragraph. So it goes to show that there is no intellectual input as a response to what we had said. They, lackeys, are saying, when I made the statement saying, oh, an economist should comment. When the permanent secretary for economy made a comment, he said he should not comment. He's an economist if they wanted the economist to comment. He made an independent assessment, he made a comment. When we comment, they said we should not comment. You see, unfortunately, I think the media has a pivotal role to play. And CFL, I think, is completely gone down the gurgler, together with Fiji Times, because they're not providing independent analysis. So here we have a statement which is about 3 pages long on an analysis of what Nilesh Gaundar said that Fiji is like Sri Lanka. The fundamentals between Sri Lanka and Fiji are so vastly different. So vastly different. Yet none of them covered that. None of them covered the actual response to that and giving the facts. Yet they focus on the last paragraph where we said that they should be independent. They said, oh, don't personally attack people. We're not personally attacking people. We actually attack. What we are saying to them is that you're professionally undermining yourself because you're not actually analyzing it objectively. That's the issue. You've got all of this available here. Anybody can, for example, look at that our foreign reserves is worth about 8 months' worth of imports. Sri Lanka had no foreign reserves left. You cannot compare a country that's gone down the gully immediately with Fiji, because the fundamentals are so different. So this is how can you treat anybody seriously when they're carrying out that kind of analysis? How can you treat media organizations like them seriously when that's the only thing they focus on, if they want to be objective about it?
So just with the issue of elections, the topic of elections, are you able to give us an update on when the Fiji First Party is going to be naming its possible provisional candidates for the elections?
As we've done previously, we will advertise, and people can apply. We have a period of time people can apply, and then we have a selection process through which candidates will then be announced.
So a week ago, the leader of the Unity Fiji Party, Mr. Lalabalavu, had made a statement. Sorry, it was during a campaign meeting. He had actually said that he was often asked to falsify data on the economy. Are you able to give a comment on this?
I don't know where he's pulling this stuff out from. If he was so aggrieved by it, and if indeed it happened, why didn't he raise it earlier on? He stood for elections in 2018. How come he didn't say it then? Is suddenly his sort of moral consciousness has come awake? Absolutely no proof provided. Who asked him to do that? Which figures did he cook up? And he's now claiming, oh, he's booted out as a result of that. No. Constitution is abrogated. All people who held those positions, there were new people appointed in those positions, or some people reappointed. I mean, this is the same man who was the permanent secretary for finance at that time, and at the same time he was the governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Can you believe that? A person is the permanent secretary for finance whilst being the governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Fiscal policy, monetary policy. We know people who do the monitoring of that need to be completely independent of each other. Yes, we have the PSO economy sitting on the board, but he or she is just one member. But here's the person who now has the audacity to be able to talk about so-called lack of good governance, etc., when he himself was part and parcel of a demise in good governance in Fiji, when he held both the positions simultaneously. How can he have any credibility? And how come he did not say anything then? All those years, he didn't say anything then. How come he didn't say anything in the 2018, before the 2018 elections? And suddenly he's now saying this? Where's the proof? What did he do? Who asked him to do it? What figures did he cook up? And why did he cook up those figures? Did somebody put a gun to his head? Did somebody threaten to take away the whiskey bottle? What happened?
Interesting comments from Mr. Rambuka over the weekend saying that Indo-Fijians who left after the 87 coup were pursuing greener pastures, didn't leave because of ethnic tensions and violence, and that they came back and contributed to Fiji. Your reaction to that, sir?
Unfortunately for Rambuka, you see, and I think people who were affected by the 87 coup, a lot of people directly, some indirectly, and some subsequently, it is an enormous insult to them. And the fact that you have somebody like the leader of NFP just sitting by and grinning and not saying a word is a further insult to that. Essentially what Rambuka is now saying is that thank God for the 87 coup, because these people would not have gone for greener pastures. That's what he's saying. People left in Fiji in droves because of the coup. They left Fiji in droves because they were discriminated against. They left Fiji in droves because overnight the entire system was changed. People were violently treated. There were rapes that occurred. People were discriminated. People were beaten up. I was here in the streets of Suva. In particular, when Dr. Bavandra got released after being held captive, he was having a prayer meeting at Albert Park. That was the impact of 87. That's what 87 did. You go and ask those ordinary people who now live in Auckland, Sydney, and San Francisco, why did they leave Fiji? I still remember vividly photographs of people queuing up. There used to be the immigration office used to be in Suva House, one of these buildings here. Outside, queuing up, desperate to get a passport to get out of Fiji. People who leave for greener pastures in a nice way don't actually queue up for hours, desperately clambering over each other to get a passport. People left in desperation. People's leases were cancelled without any objective process being undertaken. People made homeless. That was a direct result of the 87 coup. And those people who supported the 87 coup also supported the 2000 coup. Similar things had happened after 2000. And people like that were involved. They were implicated at the very least. And now we have people like Biman Prasad grinning by the roadside. I understand today in Fiji Times, they're trying to justify it, say, oh, don't talk about the 87 coup. Why not they talking about 2000 coup and talking about the 2006 coup? The 2000 coup was linked to the 87 coup. The rationale, the motivation was completely different to what happened on 5 December 2006. And people need to know that and understand that. The economic debacle that took place after 87 coup, the devaluation of the Fijian dollar, those things happened in the 87 coup. And for him now to add insult to injury by saying, essentially saying, if I did not do the 87 coup, these people would not have left for greener pastures. These people did not want to leave. The amount of brain drain that took place. I've just recently met one of the people in Canberra a few weeks ago. These people some of them were very gifted people, smart people who contributed, engineers, doctors, teachers, etc. They all left as a result of the 87 coup.
So the FCCC has come out and said that Fiji is a price tag and people can expect the price of goods and services to further increase in the coming years. Just your comments on that and your message to the people, and what sort of relief are we looking at, if any?
What do you mean, if any? We've just reduced VAT on 21 items. 9% of VAT has gone up. Please appreciate that. The fact of the matter is that nobody has ever had 21 items where VAT has been zero rated. If, for example, the VAT had not been reduced by 9% on those 21 items, you would have been paying 9% more today. If the 20% levy had not been removed, you would have been paying 20 cents more on the fuel price that you have today. As said in Parliament earlier this morning, the fuel price per litre in Fiji is cheaper than fuel price in New Zealand. Yes, of course, it's higher than what is in Australia. So, as we've said and we've made these announcements when we delivered the revised budget, we expect this period to be a period where there will be rising prices in various commodities, for example. Russia is the third or fourth largest higher producer of fuel or oil. Now, obviously, if there's an economic ban, trade ban put on by USA and various other European countries, then there'll be a shortage of supply of fuel or oil in the global economy. So what happens when there's a shortage of supply and the demand is still high? The price will go up. In the same way, for example, Ukraine, together with Russia, about 30% of the world's wheat was grown there. Again, if there's a war going on, you don't have farmers out in the fields planting wheat. So there's a short supply of that. In the same way as we've said very basically, that when there is a cyclone here, when there's a flooding of Singatoka Valley and Bar Valley, etc., when there's long beans before the cyclone is $2. After the cyclone it's gone up to $5. Yongona, $85 to $185 a kilo after Winston. So this is a supply-demand issue. We expect, for example, freight prices. Freight prices went up, almost in some areas, went up by 700-800%. A container from New Zealand cost about $5,000 before the pandemic. Now it's costing in excess of $15,000 a container. Obviously expect those prices to be passed on. So we expect, for example, in freight, God willing, around about September or so, we've been told by people who are in the market, and we're doing our own research, the cost of freight actually should start coming down, because there's been congestions in many of the major ports. As a result of congestion, the cost of freight goes up. Supply chain issues. So, whereas people before could order something from, various manufacturing countries, it would take, a month and a half you'd get it. Now the lead time is 6 months, 4 months. So those things actually does affect supply chain issue, and also the demand is still growing. So that has an impact. In terms of commodity prices like wheat, etc., for example, even gas, cooking gas, what we use in our homes. Russia supplied gas to Germany and various other countries. Now if the supply is blocked, so obviously the Germans, etc., will go to countries like Qatar and various other places. Huge demand on the supply chains. So again, price will go up. We, of course, expect to continuously, we're looking at how we can actually, buffer ourselves from these costs. Some of it, of course, is beyond our control. And some of it we'll have to be able to look at other means as to how we can, in particular, help those who are on the margins of society.
Comments also from Professor Biman about the public-private partnership with Aspen Medical, saying it was a bad deal when that Aspen is involved or has been implicated in corruption overseas. Your response to that, sir?
You see, obviously, Honorable Prasad is what's the Four Corners program. We know that there is a election going on in Australia. This is a spillover from the elections that's happening in Australia. Again, there's no factual basis to what he's saying about this particular deal with Aspen. It's not a deal. It, in fact, went through a tender process. If he's questioning the transaction, he is now saying that IFC is not independent, because IFC is the one that actually led the transaction. They did the independent analysis. It went through an open tender process. So if he's got facts, I'd love him to say that on record as to where was IFC corrupt, where was Aspen corrupt in the Fijian transaction.
So with regards to Aspen services, it has been mentioned in the past that the existing services will be free for the people. Just wanted clarification, sir, that the new services, talking about the open heart surgery, will people have to pay for it?
Sorry, will people have to pay for that? No, we have not said any such thing that people will have to pay for it. We have not said that at all. But obviously in time to come, if you're earning $500,000 a year as salary, or if you're a big businessman where you make $1 million a year, and currently you are able to go to Australia and New Zealand and get those kind of surgeries done, or you have medical insurance, then obviously we'd expect you to pay if you're earning $1 million a year. It is only fair, right? But of course, ordinary Fijians, currently all the services available there, everything is for free for them. And we've also said that those people lower in socioeconomic level or bracket will get those services for free. But if somebody is earning $1 million a year, in time to come we expect them to pay. If they're saving lots of money and they have lots of money, they can afford to go to Australia, New Zealand, India, wherever else it is. Ordinary Fijians cannot.
So just to follow up to that, will the ordinary Fijians will have to pay for the open heart surgeries at the hospital?
Sorry?
The open heart surgeries?
Yeah.
It has been talked about. Will the ordinary Fijians have to
No.
pay?
That's what I just said to you. I've said it 4 times in 4 different ways.
So, reporters without borders, quoted by Radio New Zealand, had mentioned that Fiji is one of the worst places for journalists in the Pacific. They qualified this by claiming that journalists who are critical of government are imprisoned or either threatened. So, just your comments on this.
I've had people over there from Fiji Times, from CFL, writing all sorts of comments and articles on Fiji that are factually actually incorrect about government. I would like to know from them, why don't you ask them which journalist in Fiji has been imprisoned? Very simple answer. You see, this is what's happening. You have organizations even from New Zealand, Radio New Zealand is notorious for this. I don't know who writes the stories. They write these things with so much impunity. They really don't care for the truth. They have a particular narrative they want to toe, obviously aided and abetted by people in the opposition who like to give this narrative. But the fact is, no journalist has been imprisoned. Which journalist, please show me, even in the past, say, 2.5 years, during this pandemic when there's so much, economic and social disruption, which journalist has been arrested? You have front page articles written in Fiji Times and stories done by CFL that are completely inaccurate, completely distorted. Where has anybody been punished for that? You answer the question yourself. Please go and ask Stanley Simpson then. Which journalist does he know that's been imprisoned? Despite us giving the facts, despite us objecting to it, you have organizations like Fiji Times in particular and CFL writing those theories continuously, obviously without any fear. Okay? Thank you, Naka. Thank you.